So maximize. So real quickly, go into Canvas. All right. Surely. Oh, well. Yeah, I know.
So used to typing it.
I almost never do. I almost always go here. I mean, to the website and then just. Partially because almost all my browsers elsewhere go to the school as a default as a home. All right. Took me forever to get here. What time is it? It's not as bad as it could be. Let's let people show up. All right, so let's look at assignments. Partially I'm doing this to remind me what I need to cover. So we did table expressions. We did set operators and modifying data. That's what we did last time. This is temporary tables and functions. And then we'll do stored procedures and triggers. These might take a while, particularly these, because they're fairly complex. Functions can be too. Temporary tables are not so complex. So I think we're okay. How many weeks are left? 4?
4.
Yeah, I think we'll be okay in terms of time. So these are like create a temp table, do a global temp table, create a function, a couple of functions. So I'll go over those things. Do you guys have any questions before I get started on this stuff? No? All right. So I'm just, I guess I can do these extemporaneously. I was going to look at what I did last time. All right, so I'm going to use Community Assist. Execute. And so temp tables. You guys know what a temp table is?
It's created by select state lines.
It can be, and it only exists for a short time, right? It actually, where it has its existence, although you can get it from where you are, is in the temp DB, right? So there are a couple of different ways. Let's do a couple of things here. I am going to create table, and I'm going to just do # person. See if I'm doing this right. Let's call it temp person. So the # is saying that it's a temporary table. And I'm just going to do person key int. I'm not going to make it a person last name in varchar 255 person first name, and then we're just going to do the email too. And then I'll do person email. The names don't have to be the same as in the person table. All right, so I'm going to create this temp.
Data type needs to be the same though.
The data types do need to be same because I'm going to populate it by just doing a quick query to put it in there. So I'm going to execute that. Now, this temp table, if I look over in Community Assist, it shouldn't be there. So I do not see a table called temp table there, and I shouldn't. I'm going to refresh just to be 100% sure. Actually, it's, yeah. So because it's not, it is just a temporary table. It's just when you're doing things and you need to store things temporarily. So let's do a real quick select. And what I'll do is I'll just do these same fields, person key, person last name, person first name, person email, firm person. And actually, so there's another part of this. My brain is not here yet. We need a quick insert, right? Insert into temp person. And I will put a parentheses here in these same fields. All right. So we should be able to insert into there. So 135 rows affected. And when I do select star from temp person, it should give me all the people. And I could do things to this separate from Smith or something. I could do it safely, not be touching the person table. When do you think you would use a temp table like this? What would be useful?
Testing.
Testing might be where you're going to do something dangerous with the data. Another common use, when you need to like make a change in a table structure and that table already has data, a lot of times you have to drop the table in order to recreate the new structure. So in order to not lose the data, you could copy all the data to a temp table, make your changes to the original table, and then copy the data back. It's a way of making a change without losing the data.
Did you need to specify the fields in the after the temp person?
I think so because I'm not using everything.
Oh,
If I were using everything, then I could probably not specify it. But and then I could probably do select star too, as long as it was everything. Right? But if you specify fields, if you're not doing everything, it isn't going to know which fields you're using, and it doesn't just take
when
the
you
first
in the
field.
insert into part, the temp person has only those 4 fields, right?
Right. So you could probably leave them out there. I think it's clearer to put them in, but you should leave them out there. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
If I were, if I was writing a program that would, that I wanted to create a database, but I didn't necessarily want to save it, but I might want to save it, would a temp
I
table
don't
be
know.
good for that?
So one of the questions that we haven't talked about, but it's how long does this temp person last? Anybody have a guess?
The closure session.
Exactly. It's based on your session.
Okay.
So as soon as you close the session, this is gone.
Okay.
So if you did this in a program, you would be recreating the tables every time you run it, probably.
Well,
You could do this if you need to store things in a program temporarily,
yeah,
and you don't need that as a permanent signature on the database, you could do that.
but could I, if I did that and then I decided I wanted to save it to a permanent database, would that be a reasonable way to do it?
You could. There are other ways to do that. I'm not sure. What would make the decision as to whether?
I'm trying to, there's a messing around project that I'm doing. Somebody suggested I use a database, trying to figure out how to do the database, so.
You
seems like it
could.
might be-
I just think there's probably better ways to do that.
Okay.
Because you could write the tables in code, or you could create structures that in code that resemble the tables.
Okay,
.NET, if you were using C#, you know how we've been doing the data entity type
Yeah.
thing. You can write the tables with data entities, and it takes one line, literally one line of code to write those all to the database.
so far the project's in Ruby.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So could you use like an inner join for the second select, so you're actually putting two tables together?
You could, and one of the things that you might want to do in and you could do, yeah, you could combine things in this table.
Like something you could use that for.
Typically, what you would be using temp tables is, one scenario is where you need to copy the data because you're making a change to the structure of the table. Another scenario is where you have a really complex query, and you want to be able to break it into pieces. So one of the things you could do is you could store parts of that query as subtables, and then you could join them, right? So your table itself might have a join. The data might be the result of a join, and then you could join it with another temp table or whatever. I mean, if your query is complex enough, a lot of times it's really good to be able to put it into chunks that are, that have already pre-handled some of the complexity.
Right.
These are actually, although my examples aren't that useful, they are actually really useful things. Just to show you, so I'm going to add another query. And this is still in Community Assist. I do not think I'll be able to select star from it was temp people, right? It's not in the IntelliSense, and it shouldn't be here. Is it person or? So when I run that, it'll say that it doesn't exist. Because this is when I did a new query. Can't see it. It's not on the screen. That's not good. Whoa, that's not good either. Let's see if I can bring that down a little. Well, every time I try to bring it down, it shrinks. I do not want it shrunk that much. All I wanted to show you, this is process 53, and this one is process 52. They have different session signatures. Yeah, if I go back to the other one, then it's still fine. Until I query. Yeah, right. Now, there's another kind that's called global. It's still a temp table. But it will cross sessions. And I'm trying to remember how long it endures. It endures until all those sessions are closed out, I guess. Just quickie. Not select, create. Table. Global temp person. The difference is literally one hash mark. So I'm just going to copy the structure from this. And then I'm going to copy the insert and just add a, change the name of the table. First I have to make the table though. And then so that should work. All right, now if I go to the other one and if I do this as a global temp person, should see it. Did I spell something wrong? Oh, it has to have another hash. And it does see it now. Still underlines it, but it sees it.
Go back to the other one.
Yeah. So what I did is create table. The only difference between this create table and the other is I have two pound signs. Hash signs or pound signs, depending. The difference between a global and a regular temporary table is 1 versus 2. So the thing about a global temp is that other people can see it, right? If other people were logged in at the time, as long as it was existing at that time, they could also see the temp table. And so it crosses sessions. But I think if every session goes away, I hesitate to kill everything, all the sessions, because I want the code here to show. Yeah, I'll just copy and paste it, I guess. So I'm just going to do all right, so I'm going to kill these. And then when I bring up a new query, even if I add this, when I do select from temp person, it should be gone. See, it doesn't exist. And even the global one should be global. Should be gone because all the sessions, and they need a star. And it doesn't exist either. So once all the sessions are gone, closed, the global is also gone. And once that one session was gone, the other one is gone. Does that make sense?
So global is active sessions.
Active sessions, right. Now, one of the things I'm not sure of, but which would take some tests, if you log in after, because actually we added right after we created our global, and then we added a new session. And it was still there, so it may be that all sessions have to close out before it goes away, which could be an issue. I don't know how often you use global temp, but if you had a group of people working on the same complex query, perhaps, I don't know. Has anybody ever used global template?
I mean, I've seen some things, use them, but I don't know if they.
It's also, you might want to make it global. Well, I don't know. I was thinking in a stored procedure, if you needed a temp table. The thing is that in a temp table, you wouldn't need to make it, in a stored procedure, you wouldn't need to make it global. With that one. Oh, the only thing I think of it to of a cross. Because if we do version, right, if you anyway, other than when you would temp table. It's really easy. Questions on that? Do actually, if I was more fiendish with you, is I should do some of in the SQL areas, give you some really difficult problems which involve you think you can do on performing. I won't change that. All of when you get action in it, the isn't necessarily the syntax part is knowing things to use. You know, which query structures make the most sense for what you're trying to do in that problem. And problems can be really complicated. It's amazing the kinds of questions people ask of databases. And the people that ask it aren't necessarily the people that have to actually write the query. Anyway, let's move on to functions. We did a table function, right? I don't know that these two things go together, actually. They just kind of follow into the book. We did a table valued function, remember that? It was a function that returned a table. And those are basically functions in the same kind of sense that these are, but these are going to be scalar functions. Do you know what that means?
1 answer.
Yeah, they only return a value. They don't return a table of values. The other kinds of functions, there are functions that, the main other kind of function is aggregate. And SQL Server, from what I was reading, doesn't allow you to write an aggregate function in SQL. You'd have to write it in C# or C++. It actually will accept both. MySQL won't let you write functions at all unless you write them in C. You can write stored procedures and triggers, but not functions. So functions can be really useful, basically for doing things that you have to do over and over again. For instance, if you had a retail database or something, you might want to figure out what your, the total amount due and the tax and all of that for every time. So you could have that. You could write that code in your application. You could also create a function in SQL Server that would calculate it for you. Right? Yeah.
Maybe I'm getting ahead of things, but what's the difference between a stored procedure and
So a stored procedure, so a function does one thing usually and returns a value. A stored procedure can do a lot of things. So for instance, one of the stored procedures that we'll probably do is to register somebody, or I forget what the ones for the assignment are, but we'll probably do one in class to register somebody. In Community Assist, that means that we have to take in a whole bunch of parameters. We have to insert into person. We have to insert into person address. We need to insert into contact. Okay. The other thing we need to do in that is we will need to hash their password, right? And come up. So in a stored procedure, you can do all of those things. And functions, usually you try not to do a whole bunch of things, and functions usually return a single value. Does that make sense?
Totally.
And in fact, a stored procedure can call functions. You know, it's actually a good way to kind of modularize your code.
So is that similar to like when we do writing code, a method where
a function is kind of like a method that returns a value, yes.
Okay. So you can write your functions, and then are they generally used in a stored procedure?
Well, they can be, or you can call them in a select statement. So let's do, I'm going to do a really stupid, no purpose function just to show you the basic syntax, which is what we're going to pass in a number and cube it. You know, I mean, there's no reason you would ever write this function. But just to show you how I'm going to do create a function. I'm going to call it fx cube, and I'm hoping that it isn't already in there. I'm going to look under programmability, functions, scalar valued functions. No, it's not there. The only ones I have there are the hash password, which I might show you, and the get C. But so we do that. Now we're going to take in a parameter. So I'm going to do a parentheses. I'm going to do an @ sign, because all variables have @ signs in SQL. And I'm going to just say number. And I need to give it a data type. Okay. So you can have any number of functions, of parameters. These are things that have to be provided. If you think of it, one way to think of them as a method, and the other thing is to think of them as like an Excel function. They kind of work that way too. So I am going to do an as. Oh, I have to say what it returns before I do as. It's going to return an int. And I'm going to do a begin and an end. These are the SQL equivalents of curly braces. And it wants a go up above it. All right. When we get into stored procedures, we'll have lots of begins and ends, and they're very annoying. Curly braces are nicer. So I am just going to say return at number times at number times at number. As I said, this is really stupid, but it gives you the basic syntax. And I'm going to show you some other things that we can do. We'll do a couple of different functions, some more complex. If you wanted to, if you could do, let's make this add even a little. I'm going to declare at cube int. And then instead of return this, I'm going to say set at cube equal, and then I will do return at cube. So there's an extra step in here that we didn't need to take, but I wanted to show you how to declare a variable. We've done that before. We've declared a variable. Does that make sense? So the parts of a function, a scalar function, you give it a name. You list all the parameters. If you have multiple parameters, it's one set of parentheses, but the internal, they're divided by commas. You always have an @ for the parameter name and whatever you want to name it, and a data type. It has to have a data type. We're going to, you have to have a returns, what it's going to return. Remember in the table valued function, we had returns table. In this case, we're just returning an int. The as always begins the body, and most functions require a begin and an end. The keywords begin and end, which will be the block. I'm going to show you later how to put some ifs in here and some other things. You can declare internal variables. This is different than a parameter in that it's purely internal. It doesn't have, you don't have to provide that value. Does that make sense? When you declare things, and you can create variables inside that are purely inside the function that the user will never see. So set, we set the value for that. We're returning the cube. As I said, you could just return number times number, and then we'll do an end. So what I'll do is real quickly, we'll make this function. I'm just going to highlight it and execute. Again, it just says that it's successful. If I go down to scalar programmability, scalar valued functions, and if I refresh, we now have DBO fx cube.
I got me.
What were your errors?
I got a syntax error on return.
Returns.
Oh, returns.
Oh,
Oh, okay, excuse me.
no, mine's
The
still-
first one is returns, and the last one is return.
First name, go. Oh, it doesn't say go.
The go, yeah, I mean, if you'll have a red underline if it doesn't say go. That red underline doesn't matter. I mean, it'll write just fine.
Let's try. Go.
Did that make it work?
That's, yes.
Okay, anyone else? Yeah.
It's under programmability and use.
So no, not under views, under programmability, functions, scalar valued
Is
functions.
there anything up from programmability? Or is that?
Well, programmability is on the same level as tables.
Oh, okay.
Programmability is where all of your functions, stored procedures, and triggers will go. Also later, well, actually no, types is its own area. When we do XML types.
Question, when you earlier, when you said scalar valued functions, so
Yeah.
scalar is you're creating a function to return a single value,
Right,
not multiple.
right. If you're
values.
returning multiple values, you'd have to do a table.
Okay, I got it.
We did those, right? We did if I open that, we did employee grants and then there are aggregate functions. We aren't making any. And there are, if you look under system functions, I think I showed you that before, there are hundreds of pre-built functions. So before you go around making a function, you should probably see if one exists. Because they've written a lot of them. This is really good for things that are particular to a database. Let's do another fairly simple one. Oh, let's use this one first. So this one doesn't require anything from data. So I'm going to just do select DBO, and for some reason you always have to use the schema with it. So DBO FX. It's not seeing it, so I'll just do FX underscore cube. And I'm going to give it a number. You guys have any number you want to see cubed? I'm just going to give it a 7. Okay. So despite the fact that it's underscored there, it'll work, right? A lot of times when we make things, just to warn you, it doesn't refresh over here. Even though we can see it over here, the IntelliSense isn't caught up with it. So it's marking it as not existing even though it exists. And that you can mess with trying to refresh the IntelliSense, or you can just say, screw it, it's fine. But just to warn you, I know that your instinct is if it's a red underline, that it's a problem. And actually this time it was just a go. But there are times, particularly when you want to alter a function or something, when it'll say it doesn't exist, but it does, and it'll work just fine. Okay. Questions on the basics of a function? And I could do, well, cube is a number, is a keyword. Interesting. I bet that's because you can do data cubes. In business intelligence, you can create data cubes. Yeah.
Can you put an array in there?
You could put an array inside of one, sure. Well, I don't know if there's an array data type. in SQL.
No, I mean inside the queue function.
I don't think so. It says it takes an integer. That's all it will allow. It won't even allow. It'll throw an error. No, it just ignored it. I thought it would throw an error if it had a decimal part. It just ignored the decimal.
So if we wanted to keep floating point numbers, we could just change the data types in our.
Yeah, you could change this to decimal or float or something. Okay, so let's do another function, and then we'll work our way up to a couple more complex ones. One of the ones that's we could do some. Well, let me look. What did we have? Just to think about. So a 2-week paycheck for an individual. Create a function to create an employee email address. And okay, so there are like 3. Let's do. Let's do one with like strings. So I don't want to do email because that'd be just like what it is. What could I do?
So within your function, can you create a temporary table?
You could, for sure. Yeah.
Maybe create an address online.
We could take an address on one line. That's actually good. That's a good suggestion. Thank you. So create. I'm going to do a go here because it gets upset. Create function. What do we want to call it? FX one-line address. So what I'm going to take in here,
Do you need the DBO with the front?
I need it when we use it. I don't necessarily need it when we create it.
Okay.
So we're going to need what, apartment? And I think you can do, so let's, apartment would be in bar car. What did I give it in the table? So this is in-person address. 255, I said. I think we can do null there too. I'm just going to leave it like this right now. I'm not sure if you can do default values here. You can in a stored procedure. I'm not sure if you can do it here. I'm also going to add street, city, state, and zip. So we'll just do @street. With a comma @city. @state. This one should be like in car 2. I did state as in bar car 255, which is weird because it's a 2-character state. That just shows laziness on my part. @zip, which I did also as a 255. You can get away with having different sizes as long as they are
Never exceeding.
as long as they don't exceed the underlying one. I don't know. We'll see. We might have to change those.
So, I know the practical purposes of having like 2 for state and stuff, but does it take up any more storage? in the database?
For which?
For if you had 255 instead of 2.
It doesn't take up any more storage. So if you're going to use an invar card, so that means variable characters. So what it does is it takes however many characters you put in there, and it calculates that, and it only stores that size to disk. So there's a trade-off, and whether or not which one is better is entirely dependent on your system. In-car is fixed width. If I only wrote 5 characters in there, it's going to store 9 on the disk, no matter what, right? If I had 255 in there, it would store 255 no matter what I wrote in it. So in-car is more wasteful of disk space because it always writes the same fixed width no matter what. But in-var-car requires more processing because it has to take every single value you insert into that column and determine its length before it writes it to the disk. So which matters more, disk space or processor time? It really can depend. I tend to go for in-var-car because it gives me a lot of flexibility. But if I had like 1 million records processing per minute or something, I may, the disk space might be better to waste. It's hard to say. It's something that you can do when you're optimizing your database, trying to figure out what. One thing I want to mention when you're returning a character type to, or actually anything that has any kind of precision where you have to label it, you have to put a size in there. It will not object if I just say return not in barcode with no parentheses there, returns that. But what it will return always, if you don't give it a size, is an empty string. So I've seen people struggling forever trying to, why am I getting nothing back? And it's because you didn't put an initial size on that. The other thing is with decimal, if you're returning, and decimal is what you usually use for like a lot of money types and things. If you don't give it a precision, it also returns nothing. So you have to give it a precision, and it doesn't cause an error, which you would like it to do. So after the return, I can do the as. And let's say I know that we can enter a null for apartment. And I think that we can just in here just actually put null. We'll have to see.
So can you just, at this point between the as and the return, just do anything you could normally do?
Yes, you can do literally anything in here. One of the things that we'll do in triggers is we'll put things into a temp file or a table. Like if one of the things you can do is with a delete. This is more for a trigger than a function. Difference between a trigger and a function is that a trigger only operates when it is triggered by an event. And that event could be something like insert, update, or delete, right? But one of the things I do is with deletes is I store what's been deleted into a table so that we can come back and say, well, maybe we shouldn't have deleted that. Because otherwise it's just gone, right? So it gives you a second look, if nothing else. But yes, you can put literally anything in here that fits your logic. You can have temp tables. You could create a temp table, store things in it, do a query from it, and come up with a result that way, right? You could do aggregate functions in here. I think you can do aggregate functions inside of a function. I'll have to test that. I have a vague memory of that failing once. But I think you can, and then return a resulting value. Typically, though, you don't need to do that, and I'll show you when we do one more function. But I am going to, right now, this is not for, this is just to test something. So let's do not text, test. So this is what we're going to do, but I want to test something because it'll make a difference as to what we do in the function. So let's do so I'm going to do select at, or select DBO with a space, FX one line address. All right, so I'm going to do actually, I'm going to do a literal just to test something. I want to see what happens if I put a null in here. That's mostly what I'm trying to do. I think it's going to make me enter everything. So street, city, none of this matters. I could just put garbage in here.
You have an extra one in there, don't you?
What?
You've got street number and name separately. Instead of 1000 first, you've got 1000 and first.
Oh,
And there's only one variable.
right. Good. That's all of them, right? So let's see what happens. So it accepted the null. That's all I wanted to know. So let's go up here. Now I need to alter the function because I'm changing it. You can either alter it or you could drop it and then create it again. So one of the things I wanted to do is, let's say that, how do I want to do this? So if the apartment is null, right, don't include it into the string. Let's just do that one. We could do it with a lot of the others, but I just wanted to show you an if statement in here. So I'm going to say if at apartment, and I don't need parentheses, that's a habit, is null. And then curly braces begin in. And it wouldn't hurt to practice a little indentation.
What do you mean, curly braces?
Instead of curly braces, you have begin in.
Begin in.
Yeah.
Curly braces.
So then what I will do is set at address equals at street plus single quotes. There's usually, is there a comma before city? There's a comma after city. So you just,
Yes. You can use comma bit.
so it actually would be like this. Plus at city, plus comma space, plus state, at state, plus space, plus at zip. All right. So that should be happy. What is it not like? Yeah, it's happy there. And then what we'll do is we'll do else, and we'll do a begin end. As I said, we'll grow to hate begin ends. For some reason, it doesn't bother me. I'm going to copy this, but just make one change to it. Set. So we'll do add apartment plus, and we'll do a space plus. So the only thing is I added the apartment in if it's okay. Now what is it?
That's not what you want.
Set add address equal. Oh, I see what I did. Sorry. Here we want add apartment.
Don't you want it? Well, usually the apartment would be appended to the street address.
Would it?
1000 First Avenue, number 202.
I usually do them first,
Oh, okay.
but whichever.
I think the standard normally comes at the end of the street.
Does it? We could put it there, whichever way.
But there are two equal signs, set address equal at apartment.
You're right, and that should be a plus. So if we want to move that, we could do and we need to do an empty space. Actually, so this space could go.
Yeah.
There. All right. And so this one, we need to get rid of this line because it would overwrite the other two lines. All right, so we have a rather weird thing that we could do it. So basically we have a function. I'm altering it because as I said, I could drop it. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parameters. We come in here, we declare one variable, which will be local, and then we do a little internal if to if else to determine whether there's an apartment or not. Now, some of these others have nulls too, so it could be a little ugly when I do this, but does that make sense? I mean, this shows the if. That's basically what I wanted to do, the if else. And again, the begin and end are like the curly braces in C# or something.
You've got a plus the beginning of the second set.
Oh, yes, right there. Thank you. You got good eyes.
And are you missing a comma in the next one?
A comma where?
Right up above where you are right now, between the two, between the two quotes,
Oh,
between street and address.
between street and address.
Yeah, between street.
Would there be a comma there?
You wouldn't want a comma there.
Well, you've got commas in all the other places right after the quotes.
Well, I was just trying to make it look like a regular street address. I don't think there's usually a comma there. And there's no comma like between state and zip. Also, the things that are in quotes are literals. You're just literally printing those. It doesn't matter what's in there except that if I didn't have those spaces, it would ram it all together. Let's try this. So I altered it. And what I'm going to do, because we haven't done this really, and then we'll do a numeric one of these. Select. Oh, let's do person last name. That's probably good enough for names. And then I'm going to do dbo.fx street. Notice cube is in there, but street isn't in there yet. One line address. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do person, address, apartment. I'm actually going to take these as fields, right? If it's a null, it'll pass in a null, right? So that'll person, address, apartment, comma. I'm going to just break this so it's in line. Person, address, street. Person, address, city. Person, address, state. And person, address, zip. I'll just do that here. Close that, and I'll say as address. Actually, address is a reserved word. Okay, from person P, inner join person address on p.person key equals pa.person key. So that should work. It should give their address as one line in this function. Oops.
You don't have square brackets around person, address, apartment.
That shouldn't matter.
Okay. What did the square brackets mean?
They're just because I draw it red.
Underscore after the FX.
I'm missing a what?
Underscore after the FX.
Oh, FX one line. Okay. So let me bring that up a little bit. Does that make sense? Let's see when there's no apartment. So the apartment comes after, right?
Yep.
And there's no apartment here. There is apartment. Here there's no apartment. So it is the ifs seem to be working. There's suite 344, no apartment, no apartment. Apartment 905. So I think it's working. It's doing what it's supposed to do. So that's one example. I think your email one is actually easier than that. All right. Let's do a couple with numbers, and then I think we'll be done with these. The thing with a function is that, again, anything you find yourself doing over and over again in your database, it might be good to make a function for it. So you don't have to do it over and over again. This is especially true of like calculations and things too. What kind of calculation? I'm not sure we have a good calculation in Community Assist. One simple one is we could do a donation. You could do like a quick percent to determine what percent goes to the charity and what percent goes to maintenance, or I mean, to maintenance of the charity. But that one is actually almost too simple. Let me think about. Let's do, this one involves a join in the answer, but I don't think we need to. So I'm going to do create function. What do I want to name it? Allocation. Whoa, what happened there? Did I wipe out everything? No. I have no idea how I did that. So I'm just we're gonna look at the request amount versus the allocation amounts, I guess. That's a very verbose name for a function. So what I want to do, I think, is we need to know the request. And let me look at the tables. I think I just did money. Yeah, so let's just call it money. And then the allocation, at allocation. I'm having terrible typing. Returns money, which would be nice if it really did, as, now what's in this will actually be quite easy, because we really just want to see what's the difference between the request and the allocation amount. So I could just do return at, the request is usually bigger. Is there anything you want to do to complicate that, or do you want to just leave it simple? There are times when it'll be 0. So we could eliminate 0, I suppose, if we really wanted to. Or we could just leave it as is.
Why would 0 be valid?
It would be. I was just trying to think of something to add for complexity. I'm trying to think of what we're doing that. So I'll just execute that. One other thing I'll show you after this. So I'm just going to do select. I guess let's do grant request date, request key. Maybe do the key first. Request key, request. And I think it's request amount. Allocation, what is it? I need to know what the actual, so there's grant review, grant allocation amount. And I think these have grant in front of them. And then I'll do the function. Which is, And we'll do, I asked for the request first, right? Request.
You got your FX underscore W now.
Do I? Oh, I do. No, I took the dot out, yes. So I need the grant request amount, grant allocation amount, and then I'll alias this as so it's from grant request. Inner join grant review. Let's just call it review on gr dot grant request key equals rev dot grant request key. Oops, not grant review key. Now what is, oh, and this is because it's, so let's do gr dot. Okay. I think that'll work. Okay, so the difference. Now, one of the things that happened here for the ridiculous numbers is that when I redid this database, I was copying the data over with a query, and I got off.
They're out of sync.
They're out of sync. Yeah. And so we have ridiculous numbers here.
Step the left column up one notch.
Yeah, I think it is. It's about one notch off. But I do wanted to show you one other thing you can do with this. I'm just going to copy this, and then I'm going to show you one other, but I won't actually do it. I'll just show it to you. So I'm going to copy this. You can use these functions inside of aggregates. So let's say that I wanted to see, instead of grant request key, I'm going to do grant type key. And we could, if we wanted to, add another join to get the grant, the type. And I want to do a, let's do a sum, not of the date. So we want to get rid of the date in it. Well, let's just do we want year or month? Let's do year. And then we'll do the sum of this and a sum of this. And we'll have to give this as as and I'm going to do a sum of this. And then I need to do inner join, not inner joins, I need to do group bys. Grant type key and year. Let's see if that works. Okay, so now we've got the totals. Most of them are 2015. I think I've only got one thing in 2016. But, and again, the numbers are off because the things are. But you can use these functions that you create. I wouldn't try to make them do aggregates because you can use them in an aggregate query. Does that make sense? You can, yeah, I mean, literally you can do almost anything you want here, but you can aggregate the results of the function as well as. All right, let's do one. I'm just going to show you this, I think. In the functions, so if I go down here to scalar valued functions, which we have a lot of them now, I want to show you how to do the hash password. Oops, that's not what I want to do. I want to right-click on it, script function as create to new query window. All right. So this isn't that hard, but I just wanted to show you. This does some fairly nice things. What it's, I have a different function that returns a seed, a random seed. So basically it just returns a random integer. And then we're going to take in their password. It returns var binary because that's what they want for the hash. I create a variable to hash, which is just basically this concatenated with this. Does that make sense? I have to convert the seed to an varchar. So the seed is just a random number. And then it's concatenated with the password so that you can't just do a dictionary attack. Does that make sense? You guys know what a dictionary attack is? That's where you go through a dictionary and hash all the words and see if the hashes match the passwords. So you just have a computer program that basically has a huge list of words. It'll hash each word. It'll match that word against your password, and if the hashes match. So you should never use an actual word or a password. This is one of the things, though, that even if they did use an actual word, what it does is it gives you a random number that's generated and attaches it to, you concatenate it into your password so that even if they were using a dictionary attack, they can't figure it out. Does that make sense? This is considered best practice. It's a pain in the butt.
Where did you get that?
The seed, the hash.
That chunk.
It's in your database. It's under functions, hash password. And what I did is I right-clicked on it and say script to. I just wanted to see, this is not a hard function, but it does some fairly sophisticated things. So then I declared the hashed result as a variable. And I'm using a function inside of a function, right? But I think the trick that I'm not sure of is I don't think you can use an aggregate function inside of a scalar function. Does that make sense? You can use a scalar inside of a scalar, but you can't use an aggregate inside of an aggregate. So the hash bytes is a function built into SQL Server that hashes things. And you have to give it what algorithm to use to hash it.
Which hash?
Yeah. And then you give it the string to be hashed, right? And this string is the password plus the seed. And then it returns the hash. So if I were to run this, so I'd have to have a seed. Let's.
Come up with a random number.
I could just come up with a random number. I could also call. I'm just going to declare. Oops. At seed equals, and we have the function dbo dot fx get seed, and if you want to look at that, we can. I think actually for this one, I just used the the end of the time, the milliseconds, because I couldn't get the random to work. I figured out how to use it since. So I'm going to just get the get seed. Oh, actually, I have to say that this is an int. And then I'm going to select DBO dot FX hash password. Now I use this inside of a stored procedure, so I have to give it the seed. So I'm going to give it the at seed. And what do we want for a password? How about p at ssw0rd1? So if I run those two together, it gives me the hash. And that goes on forever. A couple of things about these. You have to be careful which ones you use. So as far as I know, that's still a good hash. But hashes are supposed to be non-reversible. So you should never be able to recapture the actual words and numbers from this. But some of the hashes are broken. And some people have, because it is just an algorithm, right? It's just going through. These are only good as long as their algorithm is protected. If somebody figures out the algorithm or gets out somehow, then they can reverse the process and get back to the words. It's not encryption. You can also do encryption. I'm not going to go there, but you can. You can use different encryption methods. The difference between encryption and hashing is that encryption is reversible, and encryption always uses a key. So somebody has to have the key. One of the ways you can encrypt is it'll generate a key for you that you have to keep on a thumb drive or something. That to me is not inherently safe.
Like GPU, or used to be PGP.
Yeah. So there's two kinds of keys, and I don't want to go into that right now, really. But there's a shared key where both parties have the same key. Right. That's the easiest.
Instead of private, no.
That's a private key, yeah. And then there's a different method, which actually where both people have the key. I understand that one perfectly well. I can write that. But where they have all the parties have different keys, but they're mapped to a public. There's a public key, yeah. Which that to me is a lot more.
That lets the sender can create the message, receiver can receive the message and know for sure it's from the sender.
Right.
But you can't create a message.
Right. Where you could do this.
Whereas if you have both private keys,
right, because it's just so if you wanted to make your emails secret, you could share a private key with somebody and you could encrypt your things, and the CIA probably couldn't break it.
yeah, that's the story.
All right. Again, this one I just was showing you. One reason I showed you this is that we will use it when we do stored procedures. Because when we do the insert, the new person, we will do this. Now, actually, in the Metro Alt, there's no equivalent to this because I don't store their passwords. I assumed with the Metro Alt that everyone would have a server level login because it's not that huge. It makes perfect sense to have 500 or 600 server level logins. With this one, the thing is you can have people, you have people coming in through the web as opposed to the Metro Alt, which is more like a LAN situation. So I was letting their passwords be in a table here. So when you initially logged in, we'll talk about security later, but when you initially log in, you would just come in through a web user. So rather than try to create potentially thousands of server level users, which you can do, but it's a bit of a pain. Everybody logs in the same, and then their permissions vary depending on their user group based on their hash and passwords in there. Okay, I think that's all. I hope I gave you enough for the functions in the assignment. This one is pretty easy. These are kind of hard, not because the function itself is kind of hard, but because the Metro Alt is a bit hard to navigate in terms of knowing where the data is. So when you and this one is utterly arbitrary, and I'll accept almost any calculation. I was just thinking you would take the highest rate for that kind of employee and the lowest rate and just give them a pay in the middle. That's totally arbitrary. It's not how anyone would do it. I just wanted to have something for you to write a function on. Why is this off screen? I'm not used to having that happen. All right, I think that's good. And then Thursday will be Open Lab. So if you want to work at home, you can, but you're welcome to work here too. I'll be here for sure. I will post the code, and there is a video. Yeah, let me kill the video real quick.